Fleet Admiral Nara stood before the massive view screen watching the final battle for the Vorthak homeworld unfold below her. The planet that had ruled 1,000 star systems for centuries was now burning under the guns of human warships IVE. Years had passed since Earth fell and humanity had kept their promise. They had never stopped fighting, and now they were here at the very heart of the empire that had tried to destroy them. Her flagship was a monument to human determination. Built in secret shipyards hidden throughout the galaxy, it was larger than any vessel that had ever flown from Earth. The ship was constructed from the wreckage of destroyed Vorthak fleets and powered by technology stolen from a dozen conquered alien worlds. It was proof that humans could not just survive in this cruel galaxy but dominate it. Around her bridge worked officers who had lost everything in the war but had rebuilt themselves into something harder and more dangerous. Captain Sung Ho had watched his family die in the bombardment of Seoul. Now he commanded the weapons that were tearing apart Vorthak cities. Commander Min Kyung had been a schoolteacher before the invasion. Now she coordinated the largest space battle in galactic history. The view screen showed 6 human fleets approaching the Vorthak homeworld from different directions. Each fleet was commanded by admirals who remembered Earth burning and had spent years planning this moment. They had traveled across the galaxy gathering allies, liberating worlds, and building an unstoppable war machine, fueled by the need for justice. General Kyung Ho led the ground assault from the main invasion ship. His soldiers were no longer the desperate defenders who had fought in Earth cities with primitive weapons. They were the most feared warriors in the galaxy, trained by years of impossible battles and equipped with technology that made Vorthak equipment look ancient. The troops moving toward the planet's surface had been forged in the fires of 100 different worlds. They had learned to fight in every environment imaginable, from the ice moons of distant systems to the burning deserts of alien planets. Each soldier carried the memory of Earth and the promise that no other world would suffer the same fate. The Vorthak defenders fought bravely, but they were fighting against the ghosts of their own victims. Every human soldier remembered the day the sky burned above their homeworld. Every pilot thought of friends who had died in the early desperate battles. Every commander carried the names of the dead like weapons. The planetary defense systems that had protected the Vorthak homeworld for 1,000 years crumbled under human assault. The massive orbital platforms that could destroy entire fleets were overwhelmed by swarms of small, fast human ships that struck like angry insects. Each platform that fell opened another gap in the defenses down on the planet's surface. Vorthak civilians huddled in their homes, listening to the sounds of battle growing closer. Many had never seen actual combat before. The Empire had always fought its wars on distant worlds far from the core systems. Now war had come home, and they were learning what their victims had felt. Emperor Vorthka sat in his palace, watching reports from the battle zone stream across his screens. The being who had ordered Earth destruction was now trapped in his own capital as human forces closed in around him. His mighty empire, built over centuries of conquest, was collapsing in a matter of days. His generals begged for permission to use the most powerful weapons in their arsenal, planet-killing devices that could turn entire worlds into ash. But the Emperor knew it was too late. The humans had spread across too many star systems, destroyed too many fleets, freed too many worlds. Nothing could stop them now. The irony was not lost on alien observers throughout the galaxy. The Vorthak had created their own destroyers. By attacking a peaceful species that had asked only for the right to exist, the hunters had become the hunted. The conquerors had become the conquered in the streets of the Vorthak capital. Human soldiers moved like a force of nature. They had learned urban warfare in the ruins of their own cities, and now they applied those lessons with deadly precision. Vorthak troops who had terrorized 1,000 worlds found themselves outfought and outthought by warriors they had dismissed as primitives. Final assault on the Imperial Palace lasted 12 hours. Human forces fought their way through defenses that had never been breached in the long history of the Empire. Room by room, corridor by corridor, they pushed deeper into the heart of Vorthak power. When the last defensive position fell, Emperor Vorthka found himself face to face with General Kyung Ho. The human soldier looked at the alien ruler who had ordered his world destroyed and felt no satisfaction, only a cold sense of completion. The war was over, but the price had been paid by both sides. The surrender ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. Species that had trembled before Vorthak might for centuries watch their former masters kneel before beings they had tried to exterminate. The empire that had seemed eternal was gone, replaced by something new and potentially more dangerous. The human fleets that now patrolled former Vorthak space were different from the peaceful exploration vessels that had once carried diplomats to the Galactic Council. These were warships built for conquest, crewed by soldiers who had learned that the galaxy respected only strength. Admiral Nara received reports from across human space. New colonies were being established on worlds liberated from Vorthak rule. Human technology was advancing at an incredible pace, fueled by captured alien knowledge and the drive to never again be caught defenseless. But victory had come with a price. Humanity had won the war, but they had lost their innocence. In the process, they were no longer the gentle species that had asked for mercy from the Galactic Council. They had learned the galaxy's harsh lessons about power and survival. Other alien civilizations watched nervously as human ships appeared in their star systems. The humans claimed they came in peace, but everyone remembered what had happened to the mighty Vorthak Empire when they had underestimated these strange beings from a small blue world. The old Seer had been completely right in his prophecy. Strike first at humanity and they would never stop fighting back. The Vorthak had learned that lesson at the cost of their entire civilization. The rest of the galaxy prayed they would never need to learn it themselves, and the humans had kept their promise made in the burning ruins of Earth. They had never stopped fighting, never stopped growing stronger, never stopped making their enemies pay. The question now was what kind of rulers their former victims would become. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see whether humanity would be the guardians they claimed to be, or the conquerors they had learned to become. Only time would tell if the species that had suffered so much would choose mercy or revenge when they held absolute power. The war was over, but the future remained unwritten. Captain Dongmin stood on the bridge of his ship watching the stars through the view screen. But these were not the same stars he had seen from Earth 2 years ago. His vessel was deep in Vorthak space, hunting the enemies who had destroyed his world. The ship itself was a strange mix of human engineering and stolen alien technology, held together by determination and revenge. His crew was made up of survivors from different parts of Earth. A farmer from Jeju Island now operated alien weapons systems. A teacher from Busan had become an expert at reading Vorthak communications. A mechanic from Incheon kept their impossible ship running with spare parts that should never have worked together. They called themselves the Ghost Fleet because they appeared without warning, struck hard, and vanished back into the darkness between stars. The Vorthak had created them by taking everything they loved. Now they would learn what happened when humans had nothing left to lose. The target today was a Vorthak supply convoy carrying food and weapons to their frontier worlds. Intelligence gathered by human spies said the convoy would pass through this system in 3 hours, protected by only 2 escort ships. The aliens had grown careless after centuries of easy victories. Dongmin smiled as he remembered his old life as a cargo ship captain moving goods between Earth and its space colonies. Back then, his biggest worry was being late with deliveries. Now he commanded a warship that struck fear into the hearts of galactic conquerors. The convoy appeared exactly when intelligence had predicted. 3 massive cargo ships, each one large enough to carry supplies for an entire planet. The escort vessels were sleek and deadly, but there were only 2 of them. The Vorthak never expected to be attacked so deep in their own territory. Dongmin's ship emerged from behind an asteroid, moving fast and quiet. Human weapons had improved dramatically since the early days of the war. They no longer tried to match alien firepower. Instead, they focused on precision and surprise. The first escort ship died before it could send a warning message. Human missiles found the weak points in its armor and tore through vital systems. The second escort lasted longer, but not by much. Its crew was trained to fight other warships, not ghosts that struck from impossible angles. With the escorts destroyed, the cargo ships were helpless. They were huge and heavily armed, but also slow and clumsy. The human attack ship danced around them like a fighter plane attacking bombers, picking apart their defenses one piece at a time. But Dongmin was not interested in destroying the cargo ships. He wanted their contents. Human forces needed supplies, and the Best place to get them was from the enemy. His crew used stolen Vorthak equipment to dock with the first cargo vessel. The boarding action was swift and brutal. Human soldiers moved through the alien ship like a force of nature. They had learned to fight in zero gravity and toxic atmospheres in conditions that would have killed them before the war began. They were no longer the peaceful species that had asked for mercy at the Galactic Council. Lieutenant Commander Hyejin led the boarding party. Through the cargo ship's corridors, her team moved with the precision of surgeons and the ruthlessness of predators. They knew exactly what they were looking for and where to find it. The Vorthak crew tried to resist, but they were facing humans who had spent 2 years learning how to kill aliens. These soldiers had watched their world burn and their families die. They fought with a cold efficiency that terrified even hardened enemy warriors. Within an hour, the 3 cargo ships were empty of everything useful. Food, medical supplies, weapons, ammunition, even basic tools that could be used to build more ships. Everything was transferred to hidden human bases scattered across the galaxy. The empty cargo vessels were left drifting in space, with their crews alive but stranded. It would take days for rescue ships to reach them, days when those vessels could not carry supplies to Vorthak forces fighting on distant worlds. This same scene was happening throughout the galaxy. Human raiders struck at supply lines, communication networks, isolated bases, anywhere. The Vorthak felt safe. They moved like ghosts appearing from nowhere, hitting hard and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. The psychological impact was devastating. Vorthak, soldiers who had marched across conquered worlds without fear, now looked over their shoulders constantly. Their supply ships traveled in larger convoys with more escorts, which meant fewer resources reached the front lines. Admiral Wonsik commanded the largest human fleet operating in Vorthak space. His ships were built in secret shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and nebulae powered by fusion reactors copied from captured alien technology. Each vessel was unique, designed by human engineers who had learned to think like their enemies. Wonsik had lost his wife and children in the bombardment of Busan. Now he carried their memory into battle against every Vorthak world he could reach. His tactics were simple and effective: find isolated enemy colonies and make them pay for what happened to Earth. The attack on Vorthak Mining Colony 7 was typical of his methods. The small world was defended by a single orbital platform and a few hundred ground troops. It should have been safe, so deep in Imperial space, but safety was an illusion that humans had learned to shatter. Wonsik's fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Their ships had been painted black to blend with the darkness of space, and their engines had been modified to run silent. Human technology could not match Vorthak power, but it could be made invisible. The orbital platform died in the first 30 seconds of battle. Human missiles overwhelmed its defenses before the alien crew even realized they were under attack. The ground forces lasted longer, but not much. Human soldiers had learned terrible lessons about urban combat in the ruins of their own cities. The mining colony surrendered after 6 hours of fighting. Wonsik accepted their surrender, but he also made sure they understood the cost of serving the Empire. The mining equipment was destroyed, the spaceport was reduced to rubble, and the colonists were left to survive on whatever they could grow or make themselves. News of attacks like this spread throughout Vorthak space faster than their military could respond. Colonies that had felt secure for decades suddenly found themselves vulnerable. Civilian populations began to demand better protection, which meant pulling military forces away from offensive operations. The empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds was now fighting a defensive war against an enemy they had created through their own cruelty. The hunters had become the hunted, and they did not like the experience. Vorthak High Command issued new orders to their fleet commanders. All ships were to travel in groups of at least 5 vessels. No supply runs would be made without heavy escort. Patrol schedules were doubled and tripled in systems where humans had been spotted, but every new security measure made their empire less efficient. Every ship assigned to escort duty was a ship that could not be used for conquest. Every soldier guarding a supply depot was a soldier who could not fight on the front lines. The humans had learned a fundamental truth about warfare. It was not enough to just win battles. You had to make your enemy afraid to fight them in the first place. Fear was a weapon, and humans had become very good at using it. The galaxy watched nervously. As the war continued, species that had submitted to Vorthak rule began to whisper about resistance. Other civilizations started to wonder if the mighty empire was really as invincible as everyone had believed. The old Seer's prophecy was coming true. In ways that no one had imagined, the humans had been struck first and now they would never stop. The question was no longer whether they could survive, but whether anyone else could survive them. Dr. So-Young crawled through the underground tunnels that connected the hidden research facilities. Her white lab coat was dirty and torn, but her eyes still burned with determination. 6 months had passed since the first attack, and Earth looked like a different planet now. Most cities were gone, replaced by smoking craters or alien bases, but humanity had learned to live like moles in the darkness below. The tunnels stretched for hundreds of kilometers under what used to be South Korea. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and soldiers worked in chambers carved from solid rock. They had salvaged equipment from destroyed universities and military bases, creating laboratories that the Vorthak could not find from orbit. So-Young entered the main research chamber, where dozens of people worked around broken pieces of alien technology. Every crashed Vorthak ship, every damaged weapon, every piece of enemy equipment was brought here to be studied. Human minds that had created computers and spacecraft were now focused on understanding technology that seemed impossible. The breakthrough came from studying Vorthak armor. Plating engineer Dong Su had been working on the same piece of alien metal for weeks, trying to understand how it could be so light, yet stronger than anything humans had ever made. He ran test after test, heating it, cooling it, hitting it with hammers and laser cutters. Nothing seemed to damage the strange material. Then he noticed something odd. The armor had tiny holes in it, so small they could barely be seen even under a microscope. But when he looked closer, he realized these were not holes at all. They were channels that carried some kind of energy through the metal, like blood vessels in a living body. So-Young studied his findings and suddenly understood the Vorthak armor was not just metal, it was a machine. Each piece was connected to a central power source that made it nearly invulnerable. But if that power source could be disrupted, the armor would become as weak as ordinary steel. She shared this discovery with Captain Taijun, who commanded one of the few remaining human spaceships. His vessel was tiny, compared to Vorthak warships, more like a fighter plane than a real battleship. But he had been looking for any advantage that might help in the hopeless fight against the invaders. Taijun took his ship and crew to the asteroid belt, where they had been hiding for months. The rocks floating in space provided cover from alien sensors and gave the humans places to build secret bases. His plan was simple but crazy. He would test the new theory about Vorthak armor in actual combat. The opportunity came when a Vorthak patrol entered the asteroid field, looking for human survivors. The alien ship was huge and powerful, armed with weapons that could destroy small moons, but it was also alone and far from reinforcements. Taejun waited until the enemy vessel moved between two large asteroids, then attacked from an unexpected angle. His ship was so much smaller than the Vorthak warship that their sensors barely detected it before his weapons hit their target. Instead of trying to punch through the alien's heavy armor, Taejun aimed for the small energy conduits that Dr. So-Young had identified. His lasers were weak compared to Vorthak weapons, but they were precise enough to cut the tiny channels that powered the enemy shields. The result was spectacular. The alien's armor flickered and failed, leaving their ship vulnerable for the first time in the battle. Taejun pressed his attack, targeting the now defenseless hull with everything his small ship could fire. The Vorthak vessel tried to retreat, but human weapons were chewing through its unprotected metal like paper. Within minutes, the mighty alien warship was drifting dead in space, its crew either killed or trapped inside their ruined vessel. News of the victory spread through the human resistance like wildfire. For the first time since the invasion began, humans had destroyed a Vorthak ship in fair combat. The aliens were not invincible after all. They could be beaten if humans were smart enough and brave enough. Lieutenant Yoon-ji was one of the pilots who learned the new tactics. She was barely 20 years old and had been flying civilian aircraft before the war started. Now she commanded a squadron of fighters built from salvaged parts and powered by engines that should not have worked, but somehow did. Her first real battle came when Vorthak forces attacked a human refugee camp hidden on the dark side of Earth's moon. The aliens had finally located the settlement and sent a strike force to destroy it before the humans could escape. Yunji led 12 fighters against 30 alien gunships. The odds were hopeless. But she had learned that humans did not fight fair anymore. They fought smart. Her pilot scattered among the lunar mountains using the rough terrain to hide from enemy sensors. The battle became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Human fighters would appear from behind rocky peaks, fire a few shots at Vorthak weak points, then disappear before return fire could find them. The aliens had superior firepower, but they could not hit targets. They could not see one by one. The Vorthak gunships began to fall. Some lost their shields and were destroyed by human lasers. Others crashed into the lunar surface when their control systems were damaged. The aliens had expected an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves fighting ghosts that struck without warning. When the battle ended, 8 Vorthak gunships were destroyed and the rest had retreated back to Earth. The human refugee camp was saved and thousands of lives were preserved. But more importantly, word of another human victory reached resistance cells across the solar system. The psychological impact was enormous. Vorthak soldiers who had never known defeat began to feel something they had not experienced in centuries of conquest fear. They started to understand that these humans were different from other species. They had conquered. Back on the Vorthak homeworld, reports from Earth were causing concern among the military leadership. Conquering one small planet should have taken weeks instead. The campaign had dragged on for months with no end in sight. Human resistance was growing stronger, not weaker, and Vorthak casualties were mounting. General Korthval commanded the Earth invasion force from his flagship in orbit around the dying planet. He read intelligence, reports that made no sense to him. Humans were building weapons from scraps, fighting battles they could not win, and somehow finding ways to hurt his superior forces. The report spoke of human soldiers who seemed to feel no fear, who kept fighting, even when they were badly wounded, who chose death rather than surrender. Some of his commanders were requesting additional reinforcements, claiming that they needed more ships and troops to finish the conquest. Korthval could not understand how primitive beings with inferior technology were causing so much trouble. His empire had crushed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. Why were these particular aliens proving so difficult to defeat? He did not realize that the answer lay in the old Seer's prophecy. The humans had been struck first, and something deep inside their species had awakened something that had been sleeping for thousands of years of peace and civilization. The humans were learning that the universe was not a kind place, and they were adapting to that reality faster than anyone thought possible. Every defeat taught them new lessons. Every loss made them more determined. Every dead friend became fuel for the fire that was growing in their hearts. The war was changing both sides, but it was changing humanity most of all. The attack came without warning, just as the sun was rising over Seoul. Lieutenant Bora was drinking coffee in the pilot's ready room when the first beam of light cut through the morning sky. It was beautiful at first, like a golden sword reaching down from heaven. Then it touched the city center and everything changed. The coffee cup fell from her hands as the ground shook. Buildings older than her grandparents crumbled like sand castles. The beam was so bright it hurt to look at even through the reinforced windows of the military base. When it finally stopped, there was nothing left where downtown Seoul used to be. Just a crater of melted glass that glowed like a small sun. Alarms started screaming throughout the base. Pilots ran toward their planes while ground crews worked to get aircraft ready for takeoff. Bora grabbed her helmet and flight suit, but she could not stop staring at where her city used to be. Her apartment was gone. Her favorite restaurant was gone. The school, where her little brother studied, was gone. Everything was just gone. More beams came down from the sky like rain made of fire. Tokyo vanished in a flash of light that could be seen from orbit. London became a smoking hole in the ground. New York simply stopped existing. The Vorthak ships hung in space above Earth like black clouds blocking out the stars. Their weapons fired again and again, turning human cities into memories. Captain Jinwoo stood in the underground command center watching reports come in from around the world. Every few minutes, another major city disappeared from the map. Millions of people died with each flash of alien fire. His hands shook as he tried to coordinate Earth's defenses. But what could fighters and missiles do against weapons that could melt mountains? The communications officer was crying as she read casualty reports. Her voice broke when she announced that Paris was gone, then Rome, then Cairo. The list grew longer with each passing hour. Until that morning, these had been places where people lived and worked and loved. Now they were just names on a list of the dead. The Vorthak commander broadcast a message to every surviving human communication system on Earth. His voice was cold like metal scraping against stone. He spoke slowly as if talking to children who could not understand simple words. He said that Earth now belonged to the Vorthak Empire. All humans would serve or die. Those who surrendered immediately would become workers in alien factories. Those who resisted would watch their world burn until nothing was left but ash and regret. The message played over and over on every radio and television that still worked. Some humans did surrender, walking out of their hiding places with white flags raised high. But others did something the Vorthak had not expected. Private Hyun-ki was 18 years old and had joined the army just 3 months before the invasion. He was supposed to be guarding a supply depot outside Busan when the aliens landed. He watched through binoculars as their dropships came down like falling stars, disgorging soldiers that looked like walking nightmares. The Vorthak troops were huge and covered in armor that seemed to eat light. Their weapons could punch through tank armor like it was paper. They moved in perfect formation, never hesitating, never showing fear. They had done this same thing on 1,000 other worlds. But when they reached the depot, they found something they had not seen before. Hyun-ki and his squad had not run away or surrendered. Instead, they had set traps using every piece of military equipment they could find. They had wired explosives to doorways and windows. They had positioned themselves in hidden spots where they could attack and then disappear. The first Vorthak soldier to enter the main building triggered a bomb that brought down half the structure. 3 more aliens died when they tried to rescue their comrade. A sniper shot took down another before the squad melted back into the countryside. It was not a victory. The humans lost the depot and half their people, but they had killed 5 Vorthak soldiers. For the first time since the invasion began, alien blood had been spilled on Earth. Similar fights were happening all over the planet. Human soldiers who should have been overwhelmed and defeated were instead choosing to fight. Groups of civilians were making weapons out of whatever they could find. Factory workers were sabotaging equipment before alien forces could capture it. Colonel Minho led what was left of his tank battalion in a hopeless attack on a Vorthak landing site. He knew his men would probably all die, but he also knew that every alien they killed was one less enemy for the next group of human fighters. His tanks fired everything they had at the massive alien ships. Most of the shots bounced off harmlessly, but a few found weak spots in the armor. When the Vorthak returned fire, most of the human vehicles exploded like fireworks. But some of the crew survived and kept fighting with rifles and grenades. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the landing site in alien hands, but it cost them 40 soldiers and 2 gunships. The Vorthak commander had expected to lose maybe 3 or 4 troops instead. He watched dozens of his warriors fall to primitive human weapons. Reports like this were coming from battlefields across Earth. The humans were losing every fight, but they were making the aliens pay for each victory. The Vorthak had conquered worlds where entire armies surrendered after the first demonstration of imperial power. Here they faced soldiers who kept fighting, even when their weapons ran out. So Young barely escaped when her research laboratory was bombed. She crawled through rubble for 3 hours before rescue workers found her. Half her team was dead and all their work was destroyed. But instead of giving up, she immediately started planning how to continue her research in a new location, underground. She was not alone. Across the planet, human scientists and engineers were going into hiding, taking their knowledge with them. They were already thinking about how to fight back, how to turn alien technology against its creators, how to make weapons that could hurt beings who seemed almost godlike in their power. The Vorthak had expected Earth to fall in days like all the other worlds they had conquered. Instead, they found themselves fighting a species that seemed to get angrier and more dangerous with each defeat. The humans were not following the script that had worked for centuries of galactic conquest. In the smoking ruins of what used to be great cities, human survivors were recording messages for anyone who might find them later. They spoke about friends who had died and families that were gone. They made promises to the dead that their sacrifice would be remembered and avenged. Something was awakening in humanity, something that the Vorthak Empire had never encountered. Before the old seer's prophecy was beginning to come true, these humans had been struck first, and now they would never stop fighting back. Commander Deho walked into the huge council room, his boots making soft sounds on the smooth floor. The room was bigger than any building on Earth, with walls that seemed to stretch up forever. Hundreds of different alien creatures sat in floating chairs or stood on platforms that moved up and down like magic elevators. The air smelled strange, like metal and flowers mixed together. Strange lights danced on the ceiling, changing colors every few seconds. Deho had never seen anything like this place in his 50 years of life. He was a simple soldier from Seoul who had worked his way up through the ranks. Now he stood representing all of humanity in front of beings that looked like they came from nightmares, and dreams. Yunseo stood beside him, her hands folded behind her back. She was Earth's best diplomat, smart and calm even when things got scary. She had spent months learning about these alien species and their languages. Her black hair was pulled back tight, and her dark eyes missed nothing. She would do the talking, while Deho would stand ready to protect her if things went wrong. The Galactic Council had been meeting for 3 days, talking about the same thing over and over. The Vorthak Empire was coming, and everyone knew it. Their massive black ships had been spotted at the edge of the galaxy, moving toward the inner worlds like a slow, deadly storm. A creature that looked like a giant blue octopus with too many eyes spoke first. Its voice sounded like bubbles popping underwater. It said that its people had already prepared to surrender when the Vorthak arrived. Resistance was pointless. It claimed the Empire was too strong, too big, too cruel to fight. Another alien that walked on 6 legs and had skin like tree bark agreed its world had been conquered 20 years ago. Now its people served as slaves in Vorthak mines, digging up rare metals that powered their war machines. The creature said they were lucky to be alive at all. Most conquered species were simply killed or left to starve. Yunseo stepped forward, her voice clear and strong in the vast room. She spoke about Earth and its people, about their history of fighting for freedom. She talked about humans who had stood up to bullies and tyrants. Throughout their history, she explained that Earth wanted peace but would not simply roll over and die when threatened. Some aliens nodded their heads or whatever they had instead of heads. Others made sounds that might have been agreement, but Deho could see the fear in their strange eyes. They had all heard stories about what happened to worlds that fought back against the Vorthak Empire. The Vorthak ambassador sat on a throne made of black metal that seemed to drink in light around it. The creature was tall, even sitting down, with scales that looked like they were carved from midnight. Its eyes glowed red like burning coals, and when it smiled, everyone could see teeth sharp enough to cut steel. This alien had not spoken during the 3 days of meetings. It just sat there listening to all the scared talk about surrender and cooperation. Now it leaned forward, and its voice filled the room like thunder rolling across mountains. It spoke about the glory of the Vorthak Empire, about the 1,000 worlds that served under their rule. It described battles where entire fleets had been destroyed in minutes, where planets had been turned to glass and ash as examples to others. The ambassador said that resistance was not just pointless, but insulting to the Empire. The room grew quiet except for nervous sounds from some of the smaller aliens. Everyone knew that the Vorthak representative was not just making threats. It was stating facts about what would happen to any world that dared to fight back. That was when old Keeper Nalthek shuffled forward from the back of the room. The ancient being was so old that no one remembered when he had first come to the council. His people were called the Seers, and they were known throughout the galaxy for their ability to see pieces of possible futures. Most Seers had died out long ago, killed by wars or time, but Nalthek remained. He moved slowly on legs that shook with each step. His skin was gray like old paper and covered with marks that might have been writing or scars. His eyes were white with age, but they seemed to see things that others could not. The room became completely silent as he approached the speaking platform. When Naltek finally spoke, his voice was like wind, blowing through dry leaves, quiet but somehow reaching every corner of the massive room. He said that he had seen many possible futures spinning out from this moment. Most of them ended in darkness and death for everyone in the galaxy, but there was something strange about the future paths that involved Earth. The old Seer said that if the Vorthak attacked the humans first, something would change. Something that had never happened before in all the long history of the Empire. His ancient eyes turned toward the Vorthak ambassador and his voice grew stronger. He spoke the words that would haunt everyone present for the rest of their lives. If you strike first, they will never stop. The Vorthak ambassador laughed a sound like breaking glass. It stood up from its throne, towering over everyone else in the room, and asked what one small primitive world could possibly do against an empire that controlled 1,000 star systems. Naltek did not answer the question. Instead, he looked directly at Daiho and Yunseo with those strange white eyes. The old Seer said something that made both humans feel cold inside. He told them that their people would pay a terrible price for what was coming, but that price would forge them into something the galaxy had never seen before. The meeting ended soon after with no agreement reached and no plans made. Most of the alien representatives hurried back to their ships, wanting to get as far away as possible before the shooting started. The Vorthak ambassador left last, walking slowly and confidently like a predator that knew its prey could not escape day. Ho and Yunseo returned to their small Earth ship in silence. Both of them were thinking about the old Seer's words. Neither wanted to talk about what those words might mean for their world and their people. As their ship left the council station and headed back toward Earth, Yunseo finally spoke. She wondered out loud if they should have tried harder to make the other species understand that cooperation was better than surrender. Daiho looked out at the stars and said it probably would not have mattered. Behind them, moving through space like hungry sharks, the first Vorthak scout ships were already heading toward Earth's solar system. The Empire had made its decision, and soon everyone would learn whether the old Seer's prophecy was true.